Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 8, Text 6. Devotee of the Lord, whose heart is once cleansed by the process of devotional service, never relinquishes the lotus feet of Lord Krishna because they fully satisfy him, as the traveler is satisfied at home after a troubled journey. Purport. One who is not a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord Krishna is not completely cleansed in the heart, but a perfectly cleansed person never quits the devotional service of the Lord. In discharging such devotional service, as it was ordered by Brahmaji to Narada in the preaching of Srimad Bhagavatam, sometimes the representative of the Lord engaged in preaching work meets various so-called difficulties of life. This was exhibited by Lord Nityananda when he delivered the two fallen souls, Jagai and Madai, and similarly Lord Jesus Christ was crucified by the non-believers. But such difficulties are suffered by the devotees in preaching work very gladly, because in such activities, although apparently very severe, the devotees of the Lord feel transcendental pleasure because the Lord is satisfied. Prahlad Maharaj suffered greatly, but still he never forgot the lotus feet of the Lord. This is because a pure devotee of the Lord is so purified in the heart that he cannot leave the shelter of Lord Krishna in any circumstances. There is no self-interest in such service. The progress of culturing knowledge by the Gyanis, or the bodily gymnastics by the Yogis, are ultimately given up by the respective performers, but a devotee of the Lord cannot give up the service of the Lord, for he is ordered by his spiritual master. Pure devotees like Narada or Nityananda Prabhu take up the order of the spiritual master as the sustenance of life. They do not mind what becomes of the future of their lives. They take the matter very seriously as the order comes from the higher authority, from the representative of the Lord or from the Lord himself. The example set herein is very appropriate. A traveler leaves home to search for wealth in far distant places, sometimes in the forest and sometimes on the ocean and sometimes on hilltops. Certainly there are many troubles for the traveler when he is in such unknown places, but all such troubles are at once mitigated as soon as the sense of his family affection is remembered, and as soon as he returns home he forgets all such troubles on the way. A pure devotee of the Lord is exactly in a family tie with the Lord, and therefore he is undeterred in discharging his duty in full affectionate tie with the Lord. Dautatma Purusha Krishna Padamulam Namuchiti Muktasarva Pariklesha Pantasvasharnanam Yata. A pure devotee of the Lord, whose heart is once cleansed by the process of devotional service, never relinquishes the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, because they fully satisfy him, as the traveler is satisfied at home after a troubled journey. So when one is traveling in far distant places, he is always feeling disturbance. He's always feeling disturbance because there are so many changes of climate, changes of water, changes of food, as well as the very disturbing condition of traveling itself. Nowadays, traveling has become very fast in airplanes, but that does not mean it is any less disturbing. In fact, it's probably more disturbing. Or else you can be disturbed while traveling in a car, or you can be disturbed while traveling on a train, or you can be disturbed while traveling on foot. And strangers are everywhere, and perhaps they deal with you not very nicely, and it is expensive. In other words, traveling is very much a disturbance in all ways. There's nothing nice about traveling. But when a traveler, after having gone a long distance, finally returns home, he feels very, very happy. Prabhupada states here in the purport that even when he's traveling, if he just remembers his home and all of the nice sentimental things there, then he becomes happy. Generally, that's why he's traveling, to maintain all that. So then he becomes very happy. Now, when he returns home, then all the troubles are forgotten, because then the goal of his journey is reached, and he is no longer disturbed in any way. He forgets all about it. This is actually a very, very true example, as anybody who is out traveling and has a home realizes. Those who are out traveling and have no homes, doesn't matter where they go. So, The example is very appropriate because Krishna and Krishna's abode, this is the home. That's why we say back home, back to Godhead. The home of the living entity is that place where his heart is. You know, in America there's this saying, the home is where your heart is. Do you have that in Swedish? No? Not in Swedish. Something? What?
You have your treasure where you have your heart where you have your treasure.
Well, it's pretty close. The point is that where the heart lies, in other words, for instance, if one is very attached to a particular house or a particular neighborhood or a particular person or something, that place becomes like home. So, for every living entity, the original heart, the spiritual heart, has its original home where the living entity is most comfortable. And that is the spiritual world, together with Krishna. But due to our natural enviousness, which has developed due to our desire to become the lords and masters of this creation, we have accepted this temporary home full of miseries out of our foolishness as our real abode. Because as soon as one wants to enjoy like Krishna, he accepts a body and accepts that as his worshipable condition, where he can enjoy in that body. And thus, his heart becomes attached to the body. The heart is where the treasure is, or where the home is, and that is the body. The living entity takes shelter in the body and thinks this is the comfortable situation. And he becomes very attached in that way. But the living entity is forced to travel between bodies, and that is also troublesome. But when he is actually situated in the spiritual atmosphere, then he feels at once relieved, but only if he's purified. There is a spiritual atmosphere, for instance, in all of Krishna's temples. And if one doesn't feel relief to come into Krishna's temple, that means his heart is not purified enough to understand that this is home. For every person, home is in Krishna's temple, because that is where the Supreme Lord is residing. And that home is satisfying for everybody. So, when one's heart is not purified, even enough to understand where home is, then he'll come to Krishna's temple and think, this is very strange, because here there is no sense gratification for the material body. Therefore, I don't like it here. This is not home. Whereas for a devotee, he thinks, this is home, because this is where my soul, my spiritual existence takes rest. This spiritual existence takes rest here and is very satisfied. Although we may have so many activities to perform, but still, that is not a great austerity because we're performing them at home. Just like everybody likes to work around their house. Make the garden nice and fix up the broken this and that and make this very beautiful and that very beautiful. But we always like to work in Krishna's temple because we are working at home. We don't have to go out to some factory. We don't have to go and slave according to some whims of some sense gratifier. We simply are serving Krishna at Krishna's place. And even if we are out traveling, for instance, on Sankirtan, we are still in Krishna's place because there Krishna's service is being performed. That is Krishna's place. Whatever place we have, that becomes purified because we are doing Krishna's service there. And Krishna resides where his devotional service is being performed. And thus we become very satisfied. Just like a traveler returning to his own home, we feel satisfied whenever we return to our places of service. Because whenever the place of service is returned, the remembrance of Krishna becomes very strong. And practically that remembrance mitigates, removes all the miserable conditions of this material journey. It's like a journey. The living entities wandering. Brahmite, Brahmande, Brahmite, Kona, Bhagavana, Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Paya, Bhakti Lata Bij. The living entity is wandering not only in this world, on the earthly planet, wandering around the earth, but he's wandering from planet to planet, from universe to universe. The living entity has been wandering in material bodies throughout the whole material creation since time immemorial. Practically it is eternal time because nobody can trace out the beginning. Since time immemorial, one has been wandering through so many species of life on this planet, on other planets, and in other universes. Brahmanda. Brahmanda refers to the great egg of the universal creation. Brahmanda. Anda refers to egg. The universe is covered in a covering of the material energy. And there are many, many universes in Brahma, in the Brahman. Therefore they're called Brahmanda. The universe which is floating in Brahman. Even the scientists nowadays are saying the universes are floating in little bubbles. So, not very difficult to understand. And Brahmande, Brahmite, Kona, Bhagavana, Jeev. One has been wandering throughout different forms in all of these Brahmandas, different universes. Wandering and wandering and wandering from one time to another time, from one place to another place, from one body to another body. Let's open it again. Whenever they open the door, it gets all. One body to another body, one situation to another situation, from male to female and female to man to plant to animal to bird to fish to frog to dog to person to demigod to president of the country to street sweeper to cockroach. Up and down throughout the 8,400,000 species of life the living entity is wandering. But Kona Bhagavana Jeev, Bhagavan, refers to a very, very fortunate person. Bhagavan, that word means very, very fortunate. Some, Kona means very few. A very select, fortunate person. May, by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Bij, get the seed of devotion. Bhakti Lata Bij. Bij refers to seed. Bhakti Lata is the plant of devotional service, which is climbing up to the spiritual sky. This seed of devotion is planted by Guru and Krishna. And it is watered by them as well, specifically by the spiritual master, who helps that creeper of devotional service. The devotional service is growing. It becomes more pure, more strong. So we're comparing it here to a plant which is growing and becoming more pure and more strong. And gradually as it grows, it becomes stronger and taller and goes straight to the spiritual sky where it takes rest at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Guru Krishna Prasade Pai, by receiving the mercy of Guru and Krishna. How is that? Well, for instance, Srila Prabhupada has written all of his wonderful books. And these books are so wonderful that anybody who comes in contact with them and reads them with a little sincerity of heart and is an honest person, he will become immediately attracted to these spiritual instructions. And then Krishna, because he's so much concerned for all the living entities, sees that this person has become attracted to him in some way, and then fans that attraction so that it begins to grow more and more. And then Krishna will send that person to a spiritual master. He will send him, and spiritual master will tell him, now my dear, it is time that you surrender. It is time that you give up your wandering throughout 8,400,000 species of life. It is time you give up your wandering throughout the unlimited universes. You're not getting anywhere. Just like when one travels, he thinks he's getting somewhere. Of course, the funny thing is what he does when he gets somewhere is the same thing he does when he went. Just like when we go to make programs in some places where there's vacationers. We always laugh because they're doing the exact same thing they did when they were home. Especially if they bring their big trailers and go park in a camping ground. At home they have their TV and their can of beer and their sofa and their sex life. And on the seaside they have the exact same thing. They even bring TV sets in their campers, have antennas up there. Except instead of drinking Danish beer or Swedish beer, they drink Yugoslavian or Italian beer. And the only difference is it's a little warmer, and you can go splash in some water. Of course, one can also do that here. Essentially, there's not much of a difference. Except the difference is one had to go a long, long way and pay a lot of money. That's the essential difference, besides, between these two places in the summertime. So, this grand illusion is that somewhere in the material world, there's something which we're going to enjoy. Therefore, we are always traveling to different places in this world looking for that enjoyment. And when we get it, we, after a while, begin to realize, it wasn't so enjoyable anyway. And then they all make the long journey back, and when they come back to home and open the door, they say, home. And what was the use of the whole thing? Nobody really knows. It's this illusion that makes us think that, yes, if we just travel, and we will find a very nice place. So, in Krishna consciousness, we know what is the use of this traveling. What is the use of this wandering? We don't mean just traveling down to Italy for vacation. We mean, what is the use of traveling to another country by taking birth there? What is the use of traveling to another planet? Just like Prabhupada mentions in his book, Easy Journey to Other Planets, that one can travel quite easily by yogic process to other planets. And what is the use of such traveling? Because when one gets there, he does exactly the same thing he's doing here. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending. What's the difference? Alright, maybe one eats French food, or Italian food, or Greek food, or Bulgarian food. It's food. Food is food. Eating. Sleeping. Let's say he sleeps in an Italian bed, or a German bed, or a Greek bed, or a Czechoslovakian bed. Do you really think essentially the sleeping is different? And mating, don't even have to speak about it. It's the same everywhere. And defense is going on everywhere. What is essentially the difference? Not even essentially, even very detailed, in a very detailed fashion. What is the difference? Somebody puts more salt, somebody puts less salt. Well, you just take more salt here. What is the difference? Why should we travel throughout the whole world searching for different varieties of taste? You can have these same tastes here if you're interested in these things. No, the best thing is to give up this wandering business. Why wander from country to country, species to species? Don't think that going to different species is different. One thinks, oh, it is so nice. If I could just be a bird, I could fly in the sky anywhere I want to go. The birds, they have a lot of fun. Don't think they're not having fun. Whenever we take the ferry across, like from Helsingborg to Helsingor, you will find the birds, they are riding on the wind current of the ship. They don't even flap their wings. This is such sense gratification for these birds. They are enjoying it so much. You just see them, they're just flying like this. They don't flap. And every now and then they have some fun and they dive down. And they catch the current coming up again and they're pushed up, practically straight up. Then they level out again and they zoom off to the side and then they come back in again. I was even studying the faces of these birds. If a bird could smile, he was smiling. So many of them. And they didn't even have a passport control check at the other side. They're just flying very, very nicely. Having a lot of fun. Birds enjoy. And the dogs enjoy too. Dogs are enjoying, especially if you come and you pat them on the head. If you don't pat them on the head, then they're... And if you come and pat them on the head, then they're all happy. Every living entity is enjoying his own particular taste. And because we wish to enjoy these different tastes, we are wandering throughout many different species of life. And we want to enjoy tastes traveling to different planets, different universes, and enjoy ourselves in that way. But this is a grand illusion, because it is nothing but actually a suffering condition. So long as one is in Maya, he thinks, I will always get that enjoyment just now coming, just over the hill, just around the bend, just coming here. But one who is a little bit freed from that illusion thinks, what am I wasting my time for? I have this valuable human form of life, it's so rare. I need to accept this process of devotional service in such a way that I will purify myself and get freed from this grand illusion of this material existence. Purification and acceptance of this process. Spiritual Master engages us in service for our purification, so we stop this wandering business. We give up this wandering business and accept the shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna. And we become fixed and purified. Although there may be so many disturbing conditions in the material world, if we can just serve Krishna, they all dissolve. Little by little, more and more, but for sure, in due course of time, all of the miserable conditions in this material world will dissolve. That is a fact. They will dissolve. They will feel quite happy. A living entity will feel quite happy so long as he can be engaged in Krishna's service. Because there is no longer this pushing to travel here, travel there, to different species, to different planets, to different sense gratifications. And one becomes satisfied. Just like a traveler returning home becomes satisfied. Now sometimes when a pure devotee is traveling or preaching, he meets difficulties. Sometimes people are not appreciative. Sometimes they want to cause him a lot of trouble too. But still, simply because he can be engaged as Krishna's messenger, he doesn't mind those conditions. All great devotees of the Lord, they don't mind these conditions. Because, although they would probably feel better if they weren't there, they don't mind that they're there because they're part of the process of preaching. When one is preaching, he sometimes has to meet difficulties. Just like a soldier on the battlefield has to meet difficulties when he's fighting. Yeah. But he doesn't really mind because after all, this is his duty. This is his engagement. This is his activity. His quality to fight. Just like Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra had to meet so many difficulties. But they were for Krishna's service, therefore he didn't mind. On one level, certainly, if there's an arrow sticking in your head, you mind. It is painful. It is a disturbance. But on another hand, it is not that Arjuna sustains an arrow wound and then says, oh, this is very bad, I have to go away. He never thought like that. Even though the Kshatriyas on the battlefield of Kurukshetra had not only one or two arrows sticking in them, they had many. Sometimes the charioteer, you find description of a charioteer, he's driving the chariot. He's not even considered a Kshatriya. He's considered a Shudra. But he's driving the chariot for the warrior in the back, the car warrior, who's shooting arrows of very special nature, Vedic arrow. Then he sometimes has to sustain a very severe wound. And he will be in such incredible pain, but he has to simply tolerate it. He has to tolerate it. He has to not consider his own body, he has to consider the sake of the battle. And that if he just lays down and says, oh, now I have a headache, I should stop. Then the whole battle is lost, because pretty soon everybody has a headache. It takes about 10 minutes. So then he goes on, he pushes on, although it is so difficult, so disturbing condition. This is a Kshatriya. Kshatriya does not stop. There was actually a story about Karna. Karna was actually the brother of the Pandavas, but nobody knew it, because at his birth he was sent away in a basket down a river. Anyway, so Karna had one spiritual master, Jamadagni, Parshuram, who hated Kshatriyas. So he asked him, are you a Kshatriya? And Karna, because he didn't know who he was, he said, no, my parents are not Kshatriyas. So then he said, all right, I will accept you as disciple. So one day, Parshuram was taking rest on the leg of Karna. His head was on the leg of Karna. And there was a boar. I don't know what you call these things, really, but there was a bug that was boring a hole into the leg of Karna. And it was very, very painful. Extremely painful. Anybody else would have been screaming and hollering and running here and there trying to pull this thing out. But because his spiritual master was taking rest on his leg, then Karna did not want to disturb him. So therefore he simply tolerated the pain with great perseverance. But when his spiritual master woke up, he saw this and he said, "How did you tolerate that pain?" A Brahmin or anyone else would have immediately said, "Ow, ow!" He would have been screaming in pain. Only a Kshatriya could have tolerated it. Therefore you are a Kshatriya, and you are no longer my disciple. Of course, this was part of the pastime of the arrangement of the battle of Kurukshetra. But that just goes to show you the quality of the Kshatriyas. Great tolerance in battle conditions. Such tolerance that even though there is painful condition, he still is fighting on. So, this is actually an example to show how the preacher must be. The preacher must also be like that. Just like the Vikings used to be. I'll never forget that story. How 12 Vikings took over England. The north of England. 12 of them. They were, one of them went in there, he was fighting, and they chopped off his arm. He just put the sword in the other arm and started chopping. They conquered the whole of North England, 12 men. Simply because they did not stop. No matter what. You can shut that a little more then. It's like some kind of torture. You know, we open the one here, then they shut the one there, and then we have to open this here, then they shut that, then we need automatic. So they did not stop for any reason. So similarly the preacher must be. The preacher must be like that. He must not stop. He must go on with his service under any and all circumstances. No matter what, sometimes bodily pain may be there, he should go on with his service. Sometimes there is sickness there, he goes on with his service. Sometimes others criticize him. He goes on with his service. Sometimes others are envious of him. He goes on with his service. You cannot avoid these things. It's the material world. In the material world, as soon as one has a little opulence, there's immediately people who are envious of you. Immediate people who are hateful of you, want to cause you trouble. Others who are just plain old demons and can't stand devotees. There's demons and there's devotees. There's those who are serving Krishna as his representatives, and there's those who are serving who are representatives of Maya, the demons, heavy demons. And there are many, many innocent persons in between who are just simply victimized by these demoniac class of men. Therefore, the duty of a devotee is to be a warrior for Krishna. To fight with this transcendental word and sound. Fighting with the arrows and the what other weapons is useless. If one nowadays had to kill those who are demoniac, there'd be nobody left to preach to. Therefore, we don't bother with such things. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he showed, although he was incarnation of Krishna, he never caused any harm to anybody physically. He did not try to kill anybody. Never. He was simply conquering them with love. Flooding them with love of Godhead. Flooding them with the holy name. Flooding them with prasadam. Kirtan and prasadam. Flooding the whole world with kirtan and prasadam. Actually, Prabhupada wanted that. Many times he said, just chant Hare Krishna and distribute prasadam. That is the program for the mass of people, because mass of people are not terribly interested in philosophy. It is not that they're philosophers. Very few people are philosophers. I remember even when I came into this movement, it wasn't because of philosophy. It was because of kirtan, not even prasadam. Simply the kirtan was sufficient. But there's a rare group of persons who are philosophers, and for them, we have great philosophy. Like Lord Chaitanya preached to Prakashananda, Saraswati, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, these very great philosophically minded persons. For them, philosophy is there. The greatest spiritual philosophy. But for everybody else, that means all of us too. There is the kirtan, prasadam, and wonderful devotional service to the Lord just according to our capacity. according to our capacity to serve Krishna, there's a service to do for Krishna. There's always something that can be done for the sake of the Supreme Lord, according to your qualifications and qualities. You can be engaged in Krishna's service. Therefore, we are just trying to bring Krishna consciousness movement to all people. That is why we are making our projects everywhere, so that people can understand to surrender to Krishna does not mean you become materially impoverished. This is their greatest fear. Oh, if I surrender to Krishna, then I'll have nothing. I won't have my sense gratification. So therefore, varnashram is required. To say, no, don't worry. If you surrender to Krishna, it doesn't mean you lose anything. It means you gain everything. It doesn't mean your sense gratification will be lost. It will be just transferred. Slightly changed a little. From bodily sense gratification to spiritual enjoyment. Spiritual enjoyment is there with spiritual senses, serving Krishna. Our service is very nice when we do it for Krishna. Just like every day, it's slow starting in the working department, because after sleeping, the body falls completely into Maya, lump of ignorance consciousness develops, and then one thinks, oh, doing something, blah. But then when he starts doing, you can't stop them. Once they start going, nobody wants to stop. Because then the bliss of Krishna consciousness develops as the activities start happening. Then the bliss comes. Just by serving Krishna, it becomes very blissful. The mind becomes satisfied. One wants to do more and more and more. Then you have to go around and say, stop, come to the program, go to sleep. But then after going to sleep, ignorance. The sleeping business. It's the big source of ignorance. And then again, it's very hard to make things happen. But when one is actually purified, he knows, all right, even though it's hard to make things go, the body, to make it go, if I just start going, then it will go very nicely. If we just start going, then it will go very nicely. Just like there were some Sankirtan men who were so weak, they couldn't even get themselves out of the door. But they had just asked for a little help to get themselves out the door. And even though they're leaning up against the van, as soon as they got their hands on the book and they started moving the legs, then the blood started to flow. And then they started running up and down the street, and they're very happy again. It's like an old machine sometimes that needs to be started up with a helper battery, And then when it warms up, then it gets much better. In the beginning, it's all... Get that machine of the body going every day. Got to get the pump going here, the heart pump going, and get the digestion pump going. And then everything goes very nicely. But because of sleeping at night, and because we live in such a wonderful atmosphere, the body is very slow and doesn't get moving very well. But one who's advanced, he knows this lump of ignorance is that way by nature. If I can just help it to move forward for Krishna's service, even though it's a little difficult in the beginning, if I just push it forward, then everything will go very, very nicely. So, we're bringing up this point because we are leaving today. And when we go, that means the personal association of spiritual master will not be there. But that does not mean anything really, because the instruction is there, the Vani, instruction. The Vani or instruction is more important than the Vapu. Although, to say that to some, it sounds like some kind of a Mayavadi thing, because they think when the spiritual master is there, we don't have to take care of him. We just follow his instructions. This is also foolishness. But now, one has to follow the instruction. And there's no lack of instructions. There's plenty of them. If you've ever read that list on the wall down there, you'll see there's plenty of instructions to follow. And everybody should go on every day. Every day, have morning and evening programs. Don't stop that. And if there's nobody qualified to give class, then just sit together and read. But don't not come to the morning or evening program out of foolishness or ignorance or out of fruitive desires. Always do it. Always hear about Krishna. Always chant together. This will keep things strong in all circumstances. And always worship Gaur Nitai very nicely. And take their prasadam and kirtan very nicely. And go on working until completion. Generally what happens is that before something's finished, everybody has a million other ideas of what he wants to do. and forgets all about the finishing of the project. But this should not be. Every single worker, every one of our Krishna workers should just continue until the end of everything. When all the kids are moved in and the press is printing books by the billions, just keep right on going. Don't stop. And then, if you keep on going with intensive endeavor, then all of a sudden it'll be finished. And then you wonder what to do next. Don't worry, there are plenty of things arranged for doing next. And just to keep things going on in the construction department, Lochan and Tatasta Shakti have agreed to take up the responsibility of replacing me as construction foreman. Now they are 4 men. There are only 2 though. So everybody please cooperate with them. And if there are any questions, you can call me up. And go on very nicely, doing these wonderful things for Krishna. And this will actually be the best way to go back home, back to Godhead. Especially now, when Spiritual Master is there personally, it is easy to understand how you can please him, because it is direct reciprocation and confirmation. But when he's gone, then the mind takes over sometimes and one speculates. So one should not speculate. And one should just know it, that if you are serving Krishna nicely, serving Spiritual Master nicely, the spiritual benefit will be there equally well. That is a fact. In fact, one even becomes stronger when he serves in separation. Service in separation makes one stronger than direct service. Because in direct service, there's always a chance of becoming familiar. Familiarity breeds contempt. Whereas service in separation means you actually remember the essence of the Spiritual Master, which is that he's Krishna's representative. And he just wants you to be engaged in Krishna's service and go back home, back to Godhead. That's all. So, in this way, go on nicely serving, chanting every day 16 rounds. Don't stop chanting 16 rounds out of foolishness or ignorance for any reason. Don't go to sleep unless your 16 rounds are chanted. Absolutely, positively, with no other excuse. Don't take rest until 16 rounds are finished. Even if you're falling over on your face, just chant. And if you just try and finish your 16 rounds, you will, every day, no problem. Especially if you get up in the morning. If one gets up, for instance, at the time when we're supposed to, then immediately there's no problem to finish his rounds. And then he can work hard all day and be very, very happy in devotional service. Follow the 4 regulative principles, read these books, hear and chant, and work hard for the satisfaction of Krishna. All right, Hare Krishna.